Hello and welcome. So this is sort of a quick update episode. I haven't put in all the fancy editing and things like that, though I am using a new green screen like system. Today we just want to sit down and run through the banned and restricted announcement, which obviously came out just today, and run through the changes and the updates, mostly focusing on CC. The Blitz updates are actually quite larger than CC because Viserai has made Living Legend. We're going to do a separate video on that a bit later on, talking about the big changes and how that's going to affect the Blitz meta. But I want to do separate Blitz and CC videos because I know they appeal to completely different people. I will say though, it is very, very cool that now that Viserai has achieved Living Legend as of like last week, as of the weekend, literally, that they've come straight out and said it. I will say that, as in my last episode of Steelfur Speaks, I would have been very, very pleased if they had told us what their plan is for Viserai specializations and things like that to be used in the future. I feel like one of the pieces of the puzzle we are still missing is what happens now to Viserai specializations. Are they never playable again? Are we going to get a new Viserai with the talent when he comes back into the circulation? Or is there the case that Viserai is going to have a nerfed version of himself reprinted so that he can be used? One that can't Living Legend, or, doesn't make its way to Living Legend in the same way because it's just a weaker power but gives people the option of playing him. So I still think we need that answer from LSS, but we'll get into that a bit more when we have more data on sort of what's happening. But this is really cool. So we're getting to that and those changes later, but let's just read through the Classic Constructed announcement part of it first, and then we'll do Blitz, and then anyone who doesn't want to listen to the Blitz part can skip ahead and look away. So in Classic Constructed, the following changes are effective from May the 2nd, 2022. And I do want to give a shout out to LSS because a lot of the feedback was that the announcement didn't really give enough time for people to prepare. They're obviously responding to this feedback because Bravo cannot get Living Legend now. There is only one Battle Hardened event left, which means that he cannot actually get Living Legend, which means that this is a good response now that they have the information that he's not going to get Living Legend, to just let everyone know what's going to be happening at the Pro Tour now that they can. I will say this isn't probably the best situation for LSS to be in. I think they wanted Starvo to get Living Legend, so the format would be drastically changed, which is why they added those extra Battle Hardens. But there is also an argument that says that because they, have taken the time to give him those extra opportunities to get Living Legend, and he hasn't, that maybe he's not as imbalanced as he has previously been alluded to be, because of course Prism has won both of the Battle Hardened CC events that happened over the past weekend, which means of course that Prism, versus Starvo is a good meta, and Starvo doesn't automatically win. I will, however, say that it's still, in my opinion, not necessarily a fun deck to play or play against because of the high roll factors involved in the deck. So what has actually changed? Awakening has been banned. Autumn's Touch has been suspended until Bravo Star of the Show becomes Living Legend. Bloodshea Skeletor is suspended until Viserai becomes Living Legend. And Seeds of Agony moves from banned to suspended until Chain becomes Living Legend. So this is part of the changes they announced to us, where they said that they were moving from hard ban lists, where possible, to conditional suspensions. And these suspensions are harder to keep track of, but that's what content creators like myself are around for. But they are also good because they give you a roadmap for when your card is going to be deemed playable again. So Briar players will know they can have Skeleta back once Viserai is gone. Same goes for the new Shadow Runeblade, wherever that ends up. They'll know that once Chain is gone, they can play Seeds of Agony again, etc., etc., etc. So it's kind of good to have that limitation, and that understanding then as well of what cards LSS views as too powerful to exist in the game or against game design philosophy, like, for example, Drone of Brutality, and which cards they feel are just above the power curve based on specific conditions and certain heroes working with them a bit too well. And I think these sorts of bans versus suspensions are going to change that narrative a bit and give us a bit more variation and grey, lines, shades of grey on these announcements. I would also say, they have given us their logic for these changes, so we'll discuss what we think about those as we read through it. So the MFS Classic Constructed season has largely distilled down to Bravo Star of the Show versus Prism for the accolades, with Viserai playing a cameo role. The win percentage data that we have for over 250 events across ProQuest Season 1, Battle Hardens, and Callings show that Prism has a reasonable mix of favourable and unfavourable matchups and has largely achieved the level of success she has due to Bravo's high representation and her seemingly unique ability to put him in his place. For this reason, we are making no changes that directly impact Prism's deck construction. I will say that Starburst still beats Prism if he high rolls, and none of the changes that they've made will affect his potential to high roll. What they do affect is how much Bravo can come back into the game once Prism is winning, because Awakening, and we'll hear their logic on Awakening in a second, does greatly impact how much Bravo can come back into the game once Prism is winning. But Bravo still has a very hard time dealing with auras. It doesn't mean that it's an auto win for Prism. It is a very sort of, we'll say, balanced matchup, being slightly in Prism's favor, which is not, it's not, it's what you want for a good tournament, right? Viserai also very good against Prism. I don't know how much that's going to change. We'll talk about whether that's going to change after Skeleta. I don't really think it does. I think Viserai's aggro core is still there. So, keep reading. Viserai is in a strange place where he has a relatively low tournament percentage win due to his unfavourable matchup versus Stavro, but he has proven potent at dispatching most other heroes in the format. The data we have leads us to believe there is a high risk that Viserai becomes the next overly dominant hero in the wake of Bravo being tamed. Even under the status quo, Viserai is acting as a gatekeeper to other aggressive decks who struggle to raise the power of Skeleta plus Sonata. For this reason, we are suspending Bloodsheath Skeleta until Viserai attains Living Legend status, or earlier if there were reason to believe it would be positive for Classic Constructed for it to return while Viserai is still legal. So this is certainly true. Skeleta plus Sonata combo pretty much kills the majority of other aggro decks. It's not the only part of the recipe, if you will. But certainly it is where a lot of that power that is keeping things like Ice Lexi, Lightning Lexi, Katsu, and Briar and things like that out of the meta does come from, is because no matter how much you race Viserai, all he needs to do is get a Mordred Tide, a Sonata, pop Quill Hand, and just go off on you. But there are some other pieces to that puzzle, which means Viserai aggro is far from dead. He does still have Gloomveil, Revel and Runeblood, Mordred Tide, all these ways to push a lot of damage, Rattlebones as well. So Viserai aggro is still... Sorry, my cough is just coming through again a bit more, but I want to get this video finished. Viserai aggro is probably still the best deck in the meta. And, very much still has positive matchups into all the other aggro decks. I am thinking that maybe someone like Katsu does come back into a bit of relevance, because the 2 armor from Skeleta is actually incredibly critical for smoothing out blocks in the Katsu meta and matchup. And if you can't use that 2 armor to block like a Surging Strike early game, then you are actually going to see maybe more struggles from Viserai to keep Katsu off his Mars triggers, which could actually drastically impact the meta and the matchup. Awakening has fallen into a place where it single-handedly trades for the most explosive turns an opponent can unleash for very little cost. Awakening effectively trades time and resources opponents, then setting up their high-impact synergies for a devastating retaliation in the form of effectively 2-cost Pulverize, Crippling Crush, or Spinal Crush. We acknowledge the Calling Indianapolis winning deck of Michael Hamilton played no Awakening at all, and we believe it is because Awakening is actually at its worst in the current metagame, where Bravo needs to optimize his deck composition towards the Prism matchup. With the ban and suspended changes today, we are hoping to see a more diverse range of proactive decks become viable tournament choices. Awakening remaining in the format, in our view, would be contrary to that objective. So the logic here very much is that Viserai being nerfed opens the room for other aggro decks to come in. Awakening puts those aggro decks back in its place. So Awakening is alright versus Prism, because if Prism gets ahead, you can Awakening them back, but good Prism players don't actually get ahead of you in life. They just build a board, poke you a few times, and stay roughly the same life total as you until they kill you, right? So, this is very much... Awakening is a very good anti-aggro card. They're hoping that by banning Skeleta, they bring aggro decks back into the meta who can race Stavro, and then they need to get rid of Awakening so that those aggro decks don't get out-raced by Stavro just going, "Hey, Katsu, that was cute. You dealt me 30 damage, but here's 2. Here's a Pulverize. Here's a Spine. Here's a Dominated Spinal Crush. What are you going to do about it, right?" So I would say that in the context of those aggro matchups, getting rid of Awakening is actually quite an important part of the combination piece of trying to fix the format a little bit. I don't know how much it's actually going to work. A lot of Stavro players have already pivoted to a more control-y defensive style of deck, a deck which does not, by its nature, need Awakening because it's not trying to give you life, it's trying to defend and preserve its life as much as possible. So we'll have to see where Starvo ends up. I think the aggro decks that we're used to still struggle quite a lot into a control Stavro. And so does Viserai as well, without the OTK potential of Skeleta. Whereas Prism, loves control Stavro more than it likes aggro Stavro. Definitely does, because it's running less, explosive turns that are gonna, Spinal Crush, Crippling Crush, and really affect the Prism's game plan and take their life away really quickly, and more of a control blocking game. So, this is definitely going to be an interesting change. I still imagine that Stavro is going to be the best deck in the format. I do think that other aggro decks may come up and stand against it, especially if they have a good game into Prism. But we'll have to see where Katsu and Lexi and things like that stand. Lexi has not traditionally been good into Prism, but stuff like Katsu has been. Autumn's Touch is an interesting choice. I feel like LSS is kind of drawing here on the success they saw with the Seeds of Agony ban, where they saw a 9-of card and they said, well, that's clearly the problem. Can we get rid of it? I will say that I just don't see Autumn's Touch really playing the same role as Seeds of Agony did in that deck. I don't feel like 9 Autumn's Touch is really the problem. I do feel like they've kind of given you the solution in this article. If you're building an aggro deck and you want more reds, you include Evergreen. If you're building an aggro deck and you want more blues, you put in Breakground. You basically are losing one defensive point, which I don't necessarily agree is meaningful. Sorry, let's just read this. I realize I've skipped over it. So Autumn's Touch is being suspended as a measure to pull back the consistency and increase the deck construction opportunity cost of enabling Bravo's hero ability. Nearly all Bravo decks play the maximum 9 copies of Autumn's Touch. While they can replace the red and yellow versions with alternatives such as Evergreen and or Break Ground, the trade-off of losing a point of defense value is meaningful. Typically, Bravo decks are maxing out on all the Earth-Blue attacks that cost 3. While Blue Autumn's Touch can be replaced by another Earth card, it won't be an Earth card that can be revealed to Bravo's hero ability and then used to attack with carrying the Bravo buffs. I do disagree on that front. I think people will just put in Break Ground. I think they're happy to lose that point of defensive value. That's kind of what I was getting at. It does, again, like the Awakening choice, weaken Stavro into aggro matchups. But if you're playing a more defensive control Stavro with staunch responses and more defense reactions, you're not actually hit so much by this ability, which means that actually having the... Well, it's kind of both ways, right? If you're playing a super aggressive Stavro, you're not focused on blocking that much. You want to come in with your attack. So losing a point of defense value doesn't matter unless we're talking about an environment where there are a lot of on-hit effects, which is, of course, pointing us towards Lexi and Katsu. If, however, you're not blocking and you're doing more damage than them, and you get your control effects off, then nothing really has changed in that matchup. In the control version, losing 1 point of defense on cards you have to run is fine, but actually that version is fine cutting down the number of Earth cards they're playing, and running a lot more defense reactions because they know that they'll get to their Earth cards eventually. It's very much a strategy where they're pitching Earth cards, they're pitching Earth blues. They know that the fuses and all that kind of stuff, the Stavros, is going to come later because they're pitching all of their element cards. And eventually, once they've played all their defense reactions, the deck is just full of these element cards. They're just going to be fusing left, right, and center. So it's a question for me whether or not Autumn's Touch was the right card to hit here. Personally, I think the problem cards are in this order. Crown of Seeds, but I understand why you wouldn't want to ban a legendary. Oaken Old, but I can understand why you wouldn't want to ban a card that Oldhim also needs to stay viable. And that's it really. Those are the two main problem cards in my mind. I think you could, get rid of one of those two, and that would really hit the deck. But I don't think they really wanted to hit the deck that hard. And if you've seen me talking on my Discord and things like that, plug for the Discord. We have one now. I do a lot of chatting in there. I'm trying to do a sort of weekly or bi-weekly session of just gameplay and talking about the game with people who are in there. Though this weekend I'm at a wedding, so that's not happening. But if you see me talking in there, a lot of what I've said is that the meta shift. They don't actually want the meta to shift that much. They don't want to nerf Stavro that hard. He's so close to getting Living Legend. I genuinely believe that LSS wants Stavro to win the Pro Tour and get Living Legend. I don't think they want him limping on with this Awakening ban and the Autumn's Touch ban for another 6 months and another ProQuest season. However, I do say this. They want him to either get Living Legend at this Pro Tour, or they want him to get Living Legend at one of the Pro Quests afterwards. He is very, very close to getting Living Legend, and I think they'll be happy to see him go in Pro Quest Season 2, or they'll be happy for him to win this Pro Tour. I think these nerfs are just to make it more of a spectator sport, less of a mirror match every single round, more variation, thinking about what decks are viable now. I think there are probably 5 or 6 decks that are viable now. I think things like Briar and Prism are viable. Viscera is still viable. I think Katsu, maybe Lexi is viable. Stavro is obviously still viable. So you've got the 3, but through these nerfs, you maybe have a window opening for another 2 or 3 heroes to come in and actually make a bit of a metagame change, which I think is quite interesting, and that will be quite interesting to see. So we've got that going on in the background. We can see here, we understand that Oldhim and Briar are moderately affected by the suspension of Autumn's Touch, but are comfortable that both can adjust accordingly for a period of time that Autumn's Touch is suspended. Oldhim is massively hit by Autumn's Touch. It loves Earth 3s that block for 3. Earth Briar can be hit quite heavily by this, but the version that a lot of people are playing is more heavy on the free attacks than the zero-cost attacks. I will say that having that Earth card that blocks for 3, though, was quite big for them, especially because you love to pitch a blue Autumn's Touch to keep a Channel Mount Heroic around, and then when all your Channel Mount Heroics are gone, you can just block with it, and it's a 3 block, so I do feel like Briar is definitely negatively impacted on this. But I mean, you can't not hit the best deck in the format just because you might hit, another tier 1 or a tier 1.5 deck as well. You kind of just have to go with the changes you need to make, and then if it knocks something else down, but makes the format more fun, then that's fine. As we move into a new classic constructed format with all this changes in place, we expect to see Bravo Star of the Show continue to be a strong deck, correct, but at a power level that allows a wider range of heroes to compete against. So I think that will be achieved. I think you will see a few more good games into Stavro. My main question, really, looking at this change is Prism just going to win this Pro Tour because it can beat Stavro after these changes? And Viscera is also being nerfed as well. So, is Prism just the best deck now? I don't really know the answer to that. I'm going to do a tentative meta in a second, but for now, I think, this is where we are. So, where are we in terms of this? We've still got Stavro up here at tier 1. I think Prism and Viscera are probably still up there as well. Let's just change this, because I never like just to have a straight tier 2. I think 1.5 is an important... I think 1.5 is an important stage to have, so let's just add that in. And I don't really need to go bother all the way down to tier 3. D tier is still useful because we just put heroes there that are just not ever going to win anything. I actually put Kano up here. Viscera is still a very good deck, and I think if you predict there's going to be a lot of Viscera at the Pro Tour, you probably bring Kano, or you definitely could. I think we're starting to see though Katsu, Briar making their way up here. I think OG Bravo probably makes his way up here as well. Let's just arrange these people where we think we see them, and we can talk through some of the changes there. You can see I'm always very reluctant to put people in the tier 3. I just feel like it's unfair to a lot of them. But you see what I mean? I've always said that Fab is quite good at having a lot of tier 1.5 heroes. So Stavro maintains this top slot because he's obviously still very good after the nerfs. We haven't tested this out to prove it, but I will obviously be doing some testing over the next 2 weeks. Prism didn't get any nerfs and is still a very, very strong deck, especially because Stavro didn't disappear from the format. If he had disappeared, then Prism might have disappeared as well, because there would be a lot more aggro decks in the format that couldn't take away Stavro. Viscera is still very good, even without Skeleta, and still very good into these 2 decks, I think. Though I wonder if his representation will drop down a bit. I might even put him down here, just because people don't react well to bans. People don't want to play heroes that aren't as powerful as they were last week. So it might be these 2 at the top and all of these down at the bottom. I think Katsu comes back in because Stavro is a lot more sensitive to on-hit effects after the nerf to Autumn's Touch. I think Viscera without Skeleta as well is a lot more sensitive to on-hit effects. I do question Viscera versus Prism. I think that's a bit of a difficult matchup. Katsu versus Prism. After all the changes, that Prism's got loads of new auras and stuff like that, but I still think Katsu is favored. I think Briar is favored into, maybe not favored, but has a good matchup into all of these three. But I don't know if she's favored into those matchups. I think OG Bravo has some interesting questions going on there. He threatens a lot of the same on-hit effects that Stavro does, but he does it in a more sort of controlled way, more sort of defensive way. But actually, I probably would have put him down there. I think if Prism starts to take over, we could see Dash coming back in. Dash is actually quite good into Prism. The pistols, killing auras, high octane getting you go again, and action points. If you do a full back boost turn with high octane, you can get like 3 action points, which then can turn into pistols shooting 3 different auras, which can be really impactful in that matchup. I think Lexi, again, comes in the situation where we've got the ice version and the lightning version. I think the ice version is actually very, very good into this and this and this and this and this. And the lightning version is quite good into this and this. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see Lexi doing reasonably well at the Pro Tour. I just worry about her consistency. And then finally, Chain. I'm not sure where I land on Chain. Like, he's very understandable. He's very predictable. He can be fatigued. He burns himself through. I know Prism can fatigue him. Stavro can fatigue him. So he has a lot of fatigue problems. But he's still a very powerful deck, and if you can get things lined up. Kano is always just waiting. I love Kano. He's always waiting. The day that Viserai is the top dog, or Katsu, or Chain, or Lexi, Kano will just be there to melt some faces. Combo Bolton is still doing what he does with the Sabers. I don't know if it's still that reliable, but I know that it has a reasonably good matchup into like Viserai. The problem with Combo Bolton and Prism as well. The problem with Combo Bolton is basically that he Stavro hits him with control at the wrong time. He just loses, right? That's the main problem. You've got your 3 Luminas, you're ready to go off, you've got enough in Soul, and then the Crippling Crush comes out, or the Final Crush comes out, and you can't do it. Reinhardt's quite good. I'm not really sure he's very good into this meta. I think he might be good into Prism, maybe, all right into some of the people down here, but I don't know that he's very good into the Viserais or the Stavros of the world. Same goes for Levia. I mean, they're basically the same hero. Don't at me. Oldhim, I think, is very good, but he Stavro just does what he does better for now. OG Bravo is pretty much the same. Dorinthia just has not really worked in any way I consider viable. And Azalea still, maybe she's up here, but she's still not good. I'm sorry. I know there's been a lot of good cards added for Azalea, and I know she's doing a lot well, but the fact is that Voltaire is very, very strong, and that's one of the things that's pushing Lexi ahead. I still think I haven't seen any credible data that Azalea is good, let's put it that way. And part of the, data is important for this list. Now, obviously, it's a new tier list, and we haven't really got it under our wraps yet in terms of what the whole format's actually going to look like, but this is kind of where I leave it. And that's kind of where I think I'm happy to say, let's leave it there. So this is that's kind of where I'm putting things for now. I really do think that it's a very interesting meta. I am glad that they've made these changes. I am glad that we've reached the point that we've reached with all of these tweaks. I think there are some things I would have done differently. I probably would have gotten rid of Revel and Runeblood myself. I probably would have hit something from Prism as well. And I don't know about Autumn's Touch. I think definitely Oak and Old or Crown of Seeds. But I can understand not wanting to ban a legendary. I think that's a really big step for the game. But if you think about Crown of Seeds and Stavro, that is a really busted combination in terms of making his effects so much more consistent. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you found this video interesting. As always, the plug, we do have a Patreon. We do have a Discord server. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to get updates on all my videos. Just come and have a chat with me on the Discord server whenever you like. The link is in the comments below. And as always, I want to hear from people. If you disagree with this list, feel free to disagree with me vocally in the comments, and I will respond. I love talking to people about this game, and I will always continue talking about this game. Also, this video is going out around lunchtime on the 25th. I will be live at midnight UK, which is like 7 p.m. Eastern time, for this really spicy announcement that LSF have promised us about Uprising. So do join me live for that this evening if you want to come and watch that with me. I think it's going to be fun. We'll see, and hopefully they upload the article on time and we're not staying around up all night waiting for it to get uploaded. Talk to you all soon and have a great day.